Welcome, everybody. I think they're closing the doors, so we'll get started. My name is Mark Sanders. My colleague Thomas Binder and I are going to talk to you today about choosing between online, hybrid, and server. Are we sparking? Any sparking going on? Always a good way to start. We tried to set up some goals. We tried to sort of break it into what we're hoping that you guys would be able to get out of this and what we expect. So if we look in terms of what we would expect for you to be able to know at the end of this, there's three key things. We're going to actually talk about the features for Skype for Business, and we're going to clarify how they differ across the three choices, online, hybrid, and server. We're also going to talk a bit about the technical requirements, but this is not a deep technical session. We're really just kind of giving you some introductory conversation about that. And really what we want to have you understand at the end of this is if you look across those three choices, knowing what you know now about your current situation and where you plan to go in the next couple of years, we're hoping that you'll get a general sense of which of those three is probably best for you. Now, there's a few things in the interest of time we're going to be having a little bit of only limitation of information. We are going to talk a bit about the workloads for Skype for Business, but we kind of expect you to know them. By that we mean IM and presence, conferencing, audio, video, enterprise voice, persistent chat. These are the basic workloads of Skype for Business. We actually expect, and certainly we expect since you're here, that you're interested in Skype for Business, so that's fantastic. And we also recognize that several of you might already have versions of Lync deployed, Lync 2010, Lync 2013. You also might have earlier versions, Office Communication Server, et cetera, and that's fine. We anticipate that you're probably here trying to figure out what the best strategy is for you for Skype for Business. Okay, any questions then about what we're trying to do with the session? Go ahead if you would. So here's a quick agenda. We're going to talk about ourselves and our background a little bit, give you some details about what we call terms and acronyms, help you understand some of the new terms with regards to Skype for Business itself. Again, we'll talk about the deployment choices at that high level. We will also talk about how it's going to interact and if there's limitations in working with Exchange and SharePoint. Thomas will go into depth about administration management and technical requirements. And then this term that we use from here to there, we think is going to help you really get a sense of how to get started. Again, we're not going to go in great depth there, but a really big part of our message today is to really think through your planning cycle. Go ahead. So, with regards to me, here's a slide we created, just using some pictures. I actually live in the U.S. I live in a small town in Washington State, outside of the Redmond area. Here's a picture from my backyard. My wife and I, there's a picture of us. We actually both work at Microsoft. We actually both work with Skype for Business, so that makes a lot of interesting home conversations. I've actually been at Microsoft for quite a few years, 15 years, since 2000, and throughout most of that time, I've actually been in this part of the organization. I joined in June 2003 on at the time, the real-time communications team. And I've been with the team all the way through Live Communication Server, Office Communication Server, Lync, and now Skype for Business. So it's been an amazing adventure. I work in a part of the organization called Customer Engagement, or it's part of what we call Enterprise Engineering. And our Enterprise Engineering team, which includes Thomas, is a group of people in the product team that works directly with customers like yourself, helping you get ready for deployments, helping you with problems, success, etc. during your deployments, just trying to make sure we're always getting feedback from you on things that you think could be better, and in general, just trying to make sure we're the connection for you with the product team. So I'll pass it off to Thomas now, and he'll talk a bit about himself.
Thank you, Mark. Welcome, everyone. As already said, my name is Thomas Binder. I'm located in Austria and Vienna, so I live in beautiful Europe. I love to travel here to talk to people and meet people, about Skype for Business. I joined Microsoft in 2007. I worked from the very beginning on, back then it was OCS, I think it was in beta 3 when I joined, and did the whole journey through OCS 2007 R2, Link 2010, Link 2013, and now we are here in Skype for Business. I started in local MCS, so in Austria, Microsoft Consulting Services. About 4 years ago, I joined a group back then called the Center of Excellence. It was still MCS, but working with the largest customers worldwide to bring Skype for Business to them. And about 6 months ago, I joined the product group. So I'm now in the same organization as Mark. However, my focus is partner enablement. If I talk about partner, I'm talking about SIs, so basically everyone who deploys and runs Skype for Business, and I'm interested in what do we need to do as product group to make it easier for these partners to be successful with Skype for Business and to bring a better user experience to end users. You can also see here a picture of my baby daughter. She is as old as my job, so she's about 8 months old now. As you can see, not very good on the picture, unfortunately, but she's wearing a blue Starfleet uniform. So she's becoming a science officer. Very proud of her. Okay, let's jump into terms and acronyms. Hopefully you know all of that, but it's always good to level set. There's Skype and there's Skype for Business. When we talk about Skype, that's our consumer brand, our consumer product that everyone downloads, that I use every day to talk to my family, to talk to my friends. And there's Skype for Business. Skype for Business, that's the business version of it, and it's basically the new version of Link 2013. So it brings you all the enterprise features. You can manage your users, you can define what they can do and what they cannot do. It gives you all the security and compliance, and it allows you to use your namespace, your domain. So similar as your SIP domain, your SMTP domain, your email domain, you can say, well, all my users have Contoso addresses. If a user leaves my company, they don't have any more. That's a good thing. From the experience, we rebranded our client in a way that now the Skype for Business client looks very similar to the consumer Skype client. And that's fantastic, because your users will come to work, you will tell them, hey, you have Skype for Business, and they will say, I know what it does. I understand what it does, because I used it so often at home. It's a great product, and now I can use it at work as well. You will still need to educate them a little bit on what the new capabilities is, what they can do in addition to the regular Skype client, how they can use Skype for Business to maximize their productivity and to have effective meetings. But a lot of the learning is already done by the fact that the client has the same or very similar user experience as the client they are used to. And there's this feature about federation. Federation, it's not Active Directory federation or something like that. It's basically a trust between different Skype for Business organizations, or a trust between Skype for Business and Skype. That means if you want to, you can enable your users, all your Skype for Business users, to talk to Skype consumer users. You can use that for instant message, presence. You can use that for audio and video, and be very effective in reaching end customers, in reaching partners who don't have Skype for Business yet. But this really enables you to talk to all the millions and billions of people who are using Skype today. Today, we want to talk about hybrid. So what are these different flavors? First of all, there's the Skype for Business Server 2015. So every time we talk about the servers, we are talking about the on-premise product. It's a server that you install, well, it's a program that you install on your Windows server that sits in your data center, that you control, that you patch, that you run, that gives you the most flexibility, really, but we will go into that in the next slide. If we talk about Skype for Business Online, we are talking about the Microsoft service that you can subscribe to. Office 365, it's part of our public cloud offering, so you can go there, subscribe to Skype for Business Online, and consume all of this as part of a multi-tenant cloud, so multiple customers sharing one infrastructure, and you consume it as a service. And then there's this concept of hybrid. Hybrid allows you have your server, you have the Microsoft service in the cloud, and you connect the two of them. And it allows you to use the same namespace. So if you decided to use contoso.com as your SIP address, as your address for Skype for Business, you can use that for on-prem and online. So for someone communicating to your users, they wouldn't see if a user is online or on-prem. So let's talk about a little bit the deployment choices and go into more detail here. So I just explained there are the three different choices. On-premise, the server, everything is on-premises. It's on the very left side. On the very right side, we have online. Everything is in the Microsoft Cloud, and then there's the combination of both. In Link 2013, it was quite easy to make the decision on what you want to do. Because in Link 2013, in the server, you had the richest functionality. There was no single feature that you could use that you could not use with the server. Everything was available. And this is going to change now with Skype for Business. If you followed the keynote on Monday, you have seen the announcement about what we call the broadcast meeting. And Mark will talk about the broadcast meeting in a little bit more detail in one of the later sessions. But the broadcast meeting basically allows you to stream a meeting to up to 10,000 users. Well, obviously, you don't want to run this on your infrastructure. You want to run this from the Microsoft Cloud, from Azure Video Services. And this is where you need to enable your on-premise deployment to talk to Office 365. In the future, since we have a strong commitment to the cloud, we will add more functionality where it makes sense to run it from a cloud that you will be able only to use if you have either cloud service or if you have established hybrid. So if you look at these options, the on-server gives you the highest, the server version gives you the highest control. You have the server in your data center. You can turn it off and on. You can change all the settings. You can change the operation system. Whatever you want to do, it's your control. And it allows the deepest integration also in other components that are sitting on premises. So if you have a PBX for telephony, if you have video systems, all this integration, highest integration happens on-prem. On the other side, the online, it's a cloud service. That means it's the lowest maintenance. You sign up for it. You have some control on how you want to configure policies, functionalities for your users. But you don't need to install any patch ever. We do that for you. You don't need to upgrade. We do that for you. And then hybrid is where you can pick and choose between both worlds. So I can establish hybrid and I can say, well, my user A needs to have these on-prem features. So I place the user A on-prem, but user B has different requirements. So I put the user in the cloud, and they can fully communicate to each other. In addition, hybrid allows all my on-prem users to use features like the broadcast meeting. So usually, a decision tree would look like that. Because cloud first, again, we assume that you want to consider first Office 365. Office 365, Skype for Business Online. Skype for Business Online does not give you all the features today that you can get on-prem. But you should really look at the feature set, evaluate, and find out, well, does it give me the feature sets I need? If Skype for Business Online gives you all the features that you and your users need, well, then obviously you should deploy Office 365, and you're done with that. If, for whatever reason, and the reasons might be missing features or functionality, the reasons might be legal requirements. Maybe for whatever reason, the country, the industry you're in, doesn't allow you to move users to a cloud service, then maybe you have to, for just that reason, to deploy a server. And we'll talk about a little bit about technical requirements later. There might be technical requirements that don't allow you today to move to Office 365. So the next thing that you should look at is hybrid possible. Again, hybrid gives you the richest functionality, the most flexibility. So if that is possible, well, you deploy hybrid. And only if hybrid is not possible, well, then you can still go for the server option. And the reasons to go there, again, legal requirements or maybe some technical blockers that you might have in your environment today.
Thanks, Thomas. So before we start looking in depth at the features, there are a few strategic considerations that we wanted to highlight for you. If you're especially interested in speed, getting started, getting folks moved as quickly as possible, Office 365 is the fastest to get started. Those of you that have experience with Link Online Dedicated know that it was basically our data centers, and when you signed up for it, we started a process of actually installing servers, getting all of the telephony hookups in place, that sort of thing. It was actually a multi-month process. In the case of Skype for Business now, as part of Office 365, it's much faster. Essentially, the infrastructure is there. It's a matter of signing up for it. So with regard to speed, if you want to get started right away, this is your best option. Now, if you think about ROI, and I expect everybody here is, you probably want to think about how are you going to actually make a business impact as quickly as possible. And again, that depends on your company, your particular situation. But in a lot of cases we have seen, conferencing actually provides the best way to get some ROI immediately. You may save money on the actual per minute charges that you're already doing. You may be able to simplify and collapse multiple parallel systems that you're using across your enterprise. So conferencing in terms of an ROI gets you the quickest initial savings. Now, flexibility, Thomas talked about hybrid really gives you the most options, and we'll show you a chart next that talks about all the features, and you can see that. And then we also wanted to clarify for you, and this is particularly important. I expect you've heard all week from us this cloud-first, mobile-first strategic imperative that we have, and that really extends now to Skype for Business as well. So our development team, as we're working on features, as we're looking at new things to add to the product, we are very much taking a cloud-first approach. What this means, for any of you who have had sort of a long history with our products, up until this point, we typically built the features for the server, and then we created an online version of the server, deployed it, and provided that service. Now going forward, our development cycle is much more focused on every month, every few weeks, releasing new features to the online service, Skype for Business Online. There will be periodic times when we will do cumulative updates or other updates, and we will add features on the server side, but the pace and the frequency of change is going to be much faster on the online side. So if you're an organization that really appreciates making sure you're getting the best and the latest and the greatest, then think carefully about this. Okay, so let's look at the key question that we're going to have throughout this whole thing. And we're going to actually talk about this again at the end. But throughout all of this, you really want to think about what are your goals and success criteria. And this is going to be the essence of the conversation that you want to have with your Microsoft product team, your partner services, whoever's helping you. Very, very important. Think globally, think locally, think timing, think ROI, think business impact, all of these things. Really be clear about your goals, how you're going to actually measure that success, because all of this will be a key element in your decision about which direction to go. Okay, so here's our eye chart. We're going to actually spend a fair amount of time in this section. What we've done here is we have tried to show on the left some of the major feature areas. On the right, you can tell from the green and the gold shading that there's some limitations, etc. Now, one thing I want to highlight for everybody, you're welcome to take pictures because this is a public event. We've tried to add some asterisks because what you're looking at here in a number of cases are planned features. Things that we're working on this calendar year, we're hoping to release later this calendar year. So not all of this is in the product right now. I think you probably know that the Skype for Business server has been released. Those of you that are on a Microsoft volume licensing contract, you would actually now see it in your VL site. It's also being rolled out in Office 365. So for those of you that are on Link Online, you'll be migrating to Skype for Business Online. So if you look at this chart in terms of left to right, on the left what we highlight for you, just in the same fashion that Thomas was talking about, for your on-premise users, they would have the features on the far left. Then on the far right, you've got features that would be available to folks that are homed online. And then in the middle, there's a couple different flavors of hybrid. So again, I want to emphasize one more time, this includes things that have been mentioned this week by multiple speakers about planned features, and we've got some asterisks there. The last thing that I wanted to clarify for you is when we talk about an on-premise user and an online user, this is a key difference for Skype for Business. Across your environment, you would be able to have folks all using, for example, the same domain. Some of those folks could actually be homed on an on-premise server, and some of those folks could be homed, as Thomas talked about, online. And you can see in the middle, there are actually some feature differences depending on where people are homed. So again, back like I talked about the previous slide, you really want to be clear about your goals, your success criteria, and how people are going to use these. So let's talk about a few key areas. The ones that are yes across, I will leave those. This week, you've heard other speakers talk about some of the changes coming in the dial-in conferencing and the enterprise voice area. On the left half, you can see that this is very much features that have been available on the server. They continue to be. We've made some enhancements, etc. And that would generally go out through your local PBX or PSTN. On the right is more the online side and some changes that we're making to enable PSTN conferencing and PSTN calling. So we'll talk through some of these nuances, but this is probably the key area where there's some significant changes that are being made. I also want to clarify for you some of the areas that are in yellow. I would say in virtually all these places, there's a way to do this type of a feature in the area that's yellow. It's just that formally in this particular case, it's not available. So if you look on the far left as an on-premises user and you go down to where it says broadcast meetings, if you have only an on-premise environment and you don't even have an online tenant set up, you would not be able to actually take advantage of broadcast meetings. You have to have at least the online tenant set up. You have to have at least a place where people can be homed as users on Skype for Business so that they can actually manage the broadcast that's going out. This, again, is an example of what Thomas talked about with regards to our cloud first, mobile first. This is probably the first most visible example of a feature that we're releasing as an online service rather than everything being released on-premise and then eventually being added to online. I also want to highlight on the persistent chat row. On the far right, we show this as no. That's specific to the persistent chat functionality that's in Skype for Business server. This is one that has been in the product for several years now. It's largely unchanged from Blink 2013 persistent chat. However, for the Skype for Business Online, we do not include persistent chat. Instead, across all of Office 365, there's a new set of features called Office 365 Groups. And that is going to provide corresponding functionality for your folks that are homed online. There will eventually be an ability for them to use Office 365 Groups. And so I wanted to make that distinction. Again, that's kind of why it's yellow rather than red. It's really highlighting that there's a particular type of the server that's available for those. Okay, so let's talk about some of these in depth. So the first one is dial-in conferencing. And we've actually, you can see there's a little blue cloud on the right. We've actually highlighted for you a session this week where there's more discussion about this. Now, we're middle of the day Wednesday or so, so some of these have already happened. Some of them are coming up, but certainly you'll be able to go to the Ignite site and get the information if you haven't seen it yet. So this is an ability to participate in a Skype for Business conference via a phone. Again, taking advantage of dial-in conferencing is probably the #1 fastest way that you're going to get an ROI with Skype for Business. Now, on premises, of course, you can actually do as you always have, integrate with your local PBX, etc., go through mediation servers and gateways to local PSTN. Online, we have had integration with audio conferencing providers. That will continue to be an opportunity. But this calendar year, what other folks have talked about this week, is that Microsoft is going to actually start to deliver a native Microsoft online PSTN conferencing service, and that's what we're talking about here. The hybrid aspect, it's critical to where the user is homed. Okay, so the key is this. And again, this is planned features, so certainly things can change. But the way we're planning it right now is if your user is homed on premise, then they are going to be homed on an infrastructure in the MCU where the conference is actually hosted, where the bridge is going to be on premise. If they're an online user, that will be in the online environment. So there will be some limitations for the online users. They wouldn't necessarily do the dial-in through the on-premise environment. So this gives you an idea of the type of detail, the type of nuance that it's particularly important for you to talk to your deployment partner, deployment services and teams about this. Okay, let's go on to the next one. PSTN conferencing itself, similar kind of thing. With regard to native integration in Office 365, again, a key new feature that's coming that we're starting to deliver this year. Again, as we talk about at the bottom here, The underlying audio conferencing service, we are going to initially have an offer for this with Skype for Business, and then we're going to actually have a mechanism where folks are going to be able to be online users and then still use the Skype for Business server in the future. So again, we're starting to have ways that we're blurring the lines. And the reason that we're doing this is we want to give you as much flexibility as possible so that you can get the full, rich experience for your users. They can all participate in conferences seamlessly together, regardless of whether they are home, online, or on-premise. Okay? Continuing on now, Enterprise Voice. Enterprise Voice has a lot of different meanings to a lot of different people. You can think of it most simply as adding PSTN functionality to Skype for Business. This has been available with Skype for Business on-premise, Link 2013 on-premise, Link 2010 on-premise, etc. That's been available. With Link Online, we didn't have this functionality. We are now adding that. Again, what folks have talked about at other times during the week, this is going to be the sort of thing that rolls out sort of country by country. And that's what the session was here on the right that we talk about this. So there is going to be a capability if your users are homed in the US on Skype for Business Online to actually do this PSTN dial-out. Now, we refer to this as Enterprise Voice, but I also want to caution you that there are nuances even within that. So if you think about more advanced features like response groups, even delegation to an extent, some of these features right now will have some peculiarities in terms of how they're available and what you can specifically do across online and on-premise. So again, we're giving you the high-level view here, but we did want to emphasize for you that it's very important for you, again, to talk to your deployment teams, really be clear about your goals. And we mentioned here again, depends on where the user is homed. Again, when we talk about roadmap, we are looking at enabling online users to leverage the on-premises PSTN connectivity. So think about it from this perspective. You've got Skype for Business on-premise. It connects out through gateways, mediation servers, out to do local PSTN calls. Eventually, our roadmap, again, we're talking about planned features. We're anticipating that your online users, if they wanted to, would be able to have calls route out to the PSTN through that on-premise environment. So we're trying to enable this. It's coming. We wanted to give you a heads up now on what our planned feature is in this area. Okay? Again, we keep talking about these different sort of PSTN calling options. I talked about Enterprise Voice. Let's talk a bit further about PSTN calling. This is some of the more details with regards to this. If you look at the top half of here, what we're talking about is the native integration. I want to clarify what we mean by this. We are actually building a global network to actually carry this traffic out to the PSTN. It'll be simple to sign up. When we say it will meet legal requirements, we're always super careful about saying this. We would not actually offer it in a country unless we knew that it met the legal requirements. So again, it'll be available initially in the US. Other countries will come out over the next few years, depending on whether or not there are particular obstacles that we can get past. The features will be different from Enterprise Voice. Again, this is talking about PSTN calling. Enterprise Voice, typical PBX functionality, has quite a vast number of features. But what we have seen from our customer deployments the last few years is that essentially every customer is a little bit different. Every customer has a little bit different requirements. And more, if you think about what information workers need, information worker voice, think about it from that perspective. The actual requirements for individual users change quite a bit. So if you think of an admin manager scenario, that delegation role has some extremely strict requirements. People have to be able to do certain functionality. An admin has to be able to handle a call in terms of doing blind transfers and consultative transfers, things like that. So we recognize that there are some requirements like that are very specific. Those, in most cases, are available now in Skype for Business on-prem. More and more of those will come to Skype for Business Online. But you'll want to make sure you understand what the roadmap is and where we're going with all that. A couple benefits to highlight here. We anticipate that in most cases you would be able to port what you have today. We don't anticipate initially for your online users, if they wanted to use this service, that there would be any need for server software on premises. So if you were strictly Office 365 online, once we have this service available, you would not have to have a hybrid environment. And we think that this would be easier to administer for that reason. Question here in the front?
Is it as simple as saying that PSTN calling is adding a Skype-like capability and enterprise voice is a full set of PBX features?
So the question, if I can restate it if you don't mind, is really about, is it simple as saying something like PSTN calling is more like a Skype-like functionality, like we've had the capability for people to do Skype long-distance calling for years. I think that's a fair way to distinguish it versus enterprise voice. But again, there's a lot of detail in there. And one thing that I wanted to highlight is when we talk about the Office 365 online voice capability, and we showed you the sessions that really go into this in depth, we are going to be adding more features. So things like delegation is going to be coming to Skype for Business Online. Things like response groups are going to become. We believe that you are going to essentially get to a point where you would be able to actually do a PBX replacement in most cases. However, that again, from a roadmap perspective, takes some time. And so, yeah, it's fair in the short term in terms of what we would have in the US this year to think of it more like a Skype type of call. Yes? Any other questions? Okay, fantastic. Let's keep going then if we can. So that's kind of an overview of some of the voice differences. Let's talk about persistent chat. Here's that on the right, the particular session that we'll talk about groups. So persistent chat and the functionality of persistent chat is actually particularly popular in financial services. So think about it from the perspective that a group of traders that might be in a particular technology area, working with particular commodities, for example, they want to stay constantly up to date on the latest information, but they want it to be secure and proprietary. So they will set up a persistent chat group. Everybody subscribes to it that needs to, and they'll be able to, throughout the day, constantly keep everybody updated. But it's persistent, so anybody that steps away and comes back is able to very quickly catch up on the conversation that's happened to that point. So this is tremendously valuable. It's built into Skype for Business on premise. So it's still available in the product. What we've seen is that this type of functionality is tremendously popular across all companies. They just haven't needed the scale of what persistent chat is in the server right now. They haven't needed a separate set of servers and infrastructure to home it. So the groups functionality in Office 365 is providing that same type of functionality in that people would be able to subscribe to it. They'd be able to come back and join and take a look, and they'd be able to see a history of the conversation that had happened before amongst all of the colleagues or other business partners that were in it. Did you have a question about that?
Yeah, so the persistent chat groups that I have, is it going to get migrated to Office 365 groups? Is it some sort of tool that does that, or what do we do with that?
That's a fair question. So the question was, and I expect that's Link 2013? Okay, so Gentleman has persistent chat groups now in Link 2013. You may have hundreds of them in typical deployment. Our guidance right now is you want to upgrade and migrate to Skype for Business on-premise and keep it there, keep it working there, because we have not worked out yet whether or not and how we would actually try to migrate what you're describing. We don't want to promise it one way or the other. Really, this is a good example of highlighting for you our new development model, which is very much an agile Scrum model. So every quarter, we are taking customer feedback and customer input and really deciding what the best things to do are. And I think we'll talk about that in a moment if I can with regard to broadcast meetings. We're first rolling it out, and then we're getting a ton of feedback from customers about what do you really need. And that gives us the flexibility to keep changing our development plan quarter to quarter. So that's an excellent area to highlight. We don't yet know exactly what the best approach is to help folks that have legacy persistent chat move to Office 365 groups, but we recognize you're going to need to do that. One thing to highlight at the bottom here with regard to persistent chat specifically in a hybrid scenario, I showed you the two halves of the chart. Folks that are actually using persistent chat like his users, they would need to be homed in the on-premise environment, not the online environment. Okay? Broadcast meetings, we've talked about this. There's a great session on it. Streaming out to 10,000 people or so. A couple things to highlight here. When we say it's not available on premises, that's because you actually do have to have a tenant to be able to actually create and broadcast the session. When we say it's available for all users, where they are homed, we're talking about essentially the attendees who are going to view it. The folks that are actually going to create and present the content, they will have to be able to do that in the Skype for Business environment, either on-premise or online. But if you think about 10,000, maybe you have 1, 4, 5 folks that are actually doing the content and presenting. That requires a Skype for Business environment. Everybody else who's attending and viewing, they're viewing it in their browser. So you could even be talking about environments where it's Link 2013 and earlier. Basically, people would just click a link in the browser and view it that way. Question?
You keep saying you have to have a tenant.
Yes.
To use this.
Yes.
What does that mean from a licensing perspective? Does anybody who has Link 2013, are they able to do this?
So the question is, what does it mean from a licensing perspective to actually be able to have the tenant? No, it does not mean that everybody who has Link 2013 automatically is eligible to create a tenant. There are additional licensing changes you need to make to your agreement, absolutely. It's relatively straightforward. It's relatively easy for your account manager to do that. But it's not an automatic, everybody on 2013 gets it. This is also a bit of a nuance between our legacy Enterprise CALs, Plus CALs, and our new, if you're familiar with this, our E3, E4 type of contract. So make sure you work with your account team on the specifics of that. Yes?
Just to build on that, so if I have Office 365 tenant, but I keep Link 2013 on-prem, how does that scenario play?
So the question is, if you have, were you talking about Link 2013 tenant? Office 365 tenant. Okay. So if you have Office 365 tenant and you have Link 2013 on premise, again, the key difference here is that whoever is going to actually be presenting has to be able to use that Office 365 tenant to be able to broadcast the meeting. Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to do it, absolutely. I expect this is another area where, as we roll this out, and I encourage you to go back to the particular session here, there are going to, back to your licensing question, I expect there may be some additional licensing nuances in terms of actually using the service in this way for this many thousands of users. So again, we're mainly talking more about the features rather than the specifics of the licensing questions, but that's good. There's a question in the back, I think, here. So that's a good question. The question is if you're actually conducting a broadcast meeting and you have perhaps one of the attendees that actually wants to contribute. So in our first version, there's not that flexibility to very quickly elevate someone to a presenter role and then back down and go interaction. We anticipate that could be a very important part of our customer feedback, and that may very well be something that we add in the near term. Right now, what we anticipate is there will be something like a parallel Yammer feed or something along those lines where people will be able to do interaction and do Q&A. But broadcast meetings, as it's initially being rolled out, is primarily a one-to-many presenting type of a functionality. Okay, good. Continuing on then, here's some more details on broadcast meetings. Think of it again as a town hall meeting. For the user experience, the presenters would use the Skype for Business client. So this is important, the presenters. And remember, there's going to be different roles. The presenters are the ones that are going to actually have their content. They are going to actually, one of the presenters is going to take on a role called producer. They're going to assemble, decide what the look and feel, how everything fits together, and then they're going to decide on the final screen that actually goes out to all the recipients. Easy to schedule on an Outlook add-in. Again, the attendees join via web browser to view the live stream. And we are going to have recording, which is tremendously important because the scenario is very flexible for people that want to do a view-on-demand type of scenario. Okay? So, again, we're talking about some planned features. Cloud recording is one where there has been for some time now a request for us to provide server-based recording of conferences on-premise. We don't have that right now. It's not in Skype for Business on-premise. However, we are working on a new cloud recording service. So again, back to the cloud-first, mobile-first approach. So we are looking at actually setting up a service where you could record your meetings in the cloud. Now, we talk here, if you look at this, on-premise is not available, online supported, hybrid, etc. So supported for the users online. So again, if you're going to have people participating, I wanted to distinguish this from the broadcast meeting. If you're participating in a conference and you want it to be recorded by the cloud as a service, the users need to be online. Eventually, we'll have more flexibility, but that's the limitation in this early version. Again, this is a planned feature, and this is what we're trying to clarify. And again, what we're trying to do with our presentation today is we're trying to, as Thomas mentioned, give you the idea that there's a lot more features and functionality and flexibility and options with hybrid. But we also want to let you know that every single one of these, you really need to look at the details and understand what's best. Go ahead. Okay, video interop server, tremendous new feature that Microsoft has put into Skype for Business. It's an ability for the on-premise environment to actually enable initially peer-to-peer conversations between a Skype for Business client and a legacy video client. Again, you can say here on-premise is available, online not available. That's because right now the way the system works, it requires the on-premise environment to be able to connect to the on-premise video conferencing environment. We don't yet have a way right now for the online environment to go out and connect to every individual company's video conferencing environment. So right now it does require the on-premises or the hybrid to enable that connection between the Skype for Business server and the legacy video conferencing system. Okay? And then APIs, this is a tremendously important area. We've seen more and more examples over the years where people have used the APIs to really add some creative functionality. Sometimes you want to be able to put just basic functionality, presence IM, calling, etc., a presence icon in an application no matter where in your business environment that is. So you might have, for example, an invoice approving system, and in there, wherever there's someone's name, you could put a presence icon. And that would enable the person going through that process to actually, if they have a question, they could very quickly ask inside the application to get their question answered. This has been stuff, I'll get your question in just a moment. This has been stuff that has been available on our server for several years. It has not, the APIs have not been available online. So what you see here is now we're starting to show you a column for when these APIs are going to be coming for Skype for Business Online. Some will and some will not. You can see at the bottom there's actually a developer platform, especially around Web SDK, Services SDK. So what we're talking about here is we are building significant new functionality, and you can see the Web SDK is available now with Skype for Business Server. We are building significant new functionality in our APIs to enable you to really customize your applications. Depending on the browser, depending on some of the HTML5 and the WebRTC and ORTC functionality, you will be able to do some B2C scenarios where people will be able to actually interact with you from a browser page, including audio and video. So tremendously powerful. You can see here that we're especially focused on the web APIs, bringing those to the online environment. So we want to enable customers that are online to start having the same API functionality that has not been available before. Okay? Yeah, I'm sorry, question in the front.
Does the telemetry you capture in conferencing, does that get surfaced as an API?
So that's a good question. He's asking about, does the telemetry that gets captured in conferencing get surfaced in an API? So we actually have an API that we call our SDN API, and you may be familiar with this. And what some of our partners do is they take that API, which is essentially a feed from the monitoring server, and they integrate that, for example, with their network management system. And so they can correlate What does the monitoring server data say about a particular conference, like you mentioned, if there were particular problems for maybe individual users? Take that data and then correlate it with the network management data to see whether or not maybe some particular congestion or some other problem in the network actually affected the users in that way. So yeah, that part of it is available through that SDN.
Online as well as on-prem.
It's coming a bit later for online, but it will be eventually there, yes. But we didn't have a time frame cleared up enough to put on this slide. Yes?
For things like UCY or Skype APIs, is there a timeline on when those will actually be available for Office 365?
There is. To be honest, we weren't firm enough about it to put it on the slide. So, I mean, it is coming in the next few months, but there's been a lot of development work.
Curious because going back a year or two, it's been a plan.
Yes, yes, that's a fair point. We'll take your feedback on that. Okay, pardon?
You'll take the hit.
It's a fair point. I agree. Many of my customers have told us the same thing. Okay, so this is the overall feature one that I showed again. Given what I just said, take a quick look at that, and then Thomas will have some more things to discuss.
There's one more question.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Johnny, you mentioned that in the future, I will be able to have conference in the service and then go and use my enterprise voice open Teams. Can I use my gateway and everything? And didn't have a deployment. Can I use my own open gateways to publish the dialing, utilize my own gateways and utilize the conference service models?
Fair question. So he's basically asking, can he use his on-prem gateways and publish that as a dialing conferencing mechanism for online users? You'll see here, it's a little bit of a nuance. If you look at the dialing conferencing role, there's a straight line. Versus if you look at the next one down, the enterprise voice, there's a little notch that shows that there's some additional functionality in the hybrid for both flavors. The reason there's not a notch in the one above it is because right now my answer to you would be currently, with what we have planned, the answer is no for the dialing conferencing scenario specifically. I don't know if that'll change or not, but we tried to make it accurate for what we know today. So to do the dialing conferencing specifically, the answer is no, because the user, the online user that would be organizing that meeting would actually be on an online MCU. And so there wouldn't be a mechanism for that online MCU to actually use your on-premise gateways and mediation server to dial out and create that dial-in functionality. Pardon me? Yeah. Yeah, so right now, the answer for that particular nuance is no. But there's always, like I said, a lot of flexibility in what we're going to do going forward. Okay, go ahead.
You want to take one more?
Yeah, sure. Oh, it's at the end, sir.
So you mentioned that audio conferencing is going to roll out in the U.S. market first.
Yes.
Do you have an estimate of time for global?
So the question is, we talked about we're going to roll out this new service in the U.S. This calendar year, basically. Do we have it more defined globally? Not specifically. Again, we're looking country by country. We're hoping that maybe some European countries we might be able to do early in 2016. But again, there's just so many specifics about each one we want to be very careful about not talking specifically about an individual country until we really know for sure. Okay, go ahead, Thomas. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a question on the far left. Fair question. So I think the question, if I restate it correctly, was considering the cloud-first perspective and the fact that we just shipped Skype for Business server on-premise, should we be thinking more along the lines of we won't have any more Skype for Business server releases after this one? I would say this. I don't honestly know if we will have another major release. However, I can tell you we have no plans not to continue to add features to the Skype for Business on-premise environment. It's just that they won't be at the same pace as they are for online. They will tend to be grouped together, and they will be released maybe as CUs or service packs or whatever we decide to do. So the release functionality is primarily the difference. And I don't know if at the point where we get to a bunch of changes on Skype for Business server, if we'll decide it actually requires an all-new release. We don't actually know that yet. Okay, Thomas, go ahead.
Perfect. So now you know you want to have Skype for Business. Fantastic. And probably you know, or maybe you know already, in what flavor you want to have it. But what you don't know yet is, what about my existing Exchange and SharePoint? So you have already Exchange, SharePoint. It's either in the cloud, it's on-prem, it's in hybrid. What are the dependencies? Because Skype for Business is integrating with these services, and they give your users additional functionality. For Exchange, there are a number of scenarios that are supported no matter where the Exchange server is related to the Skype for Business servers. So if your user opens Outlook, they have Skype for Business as well. They will see in Outlook the presence of their contacts. They will be able to initiate instant messages, calls, communication directly from Outlook. Also, they will be able in Outlook to schedule meetings. They can go to the calendar. There's a button that says New Skype for Business Meeting. They can do that. All the conversation history, the call logs, if they talk to someone, if they exchange instant messages, all of that goes to Outlook, no matter where Exchange is located. Also, Skype for Business will read your calendar. It will know when you have a meeting, and it will automatically change your status to in a meeting, so that people who want to contact you see that you're not green, available, but that you're red, that you are busy. And meeting delegation, there's one nuance to that. The delegee and the delegator, they have to be in the same environment. So if both of them are online, great. If both of them are on-prem, great. If one is online, one is on-prem, not so great. But this is really a simple thing that you just need to set up. And there are a number of features that are not working in one specific scenario. The specific scenario is you are consuming Skype for Business online and Exchange on-prem. And it's always dependent on where the user is located. So this is a user, has a Skype for Business online account, and the Exchange mailbox is hosted on-prem. For these users, if they go to the Outlook web app, they will not see in the Outlook web app, in the browser, they will not see any presence, or they will not be able to send instant messages. Users in any other combination, they will have this feature available and will be able to do that. Also, scheduling meetings in Outlook web app is not available to this specific scenario. All the other users, they can schedule their meetings. If you're doing message archiving, that means that server-side, we archive all your instant messages in order to meet compliance requirements. You need to have either Skype for Business online with Exchange online, or both on-prem, or you have Exchange online and Skype for Business on-prem. If you have Skype for Business online, Exchange on-prem, you cannot use Exchange as an archive. You could still use a SQL server and write all the data to SQL. And finally, and that's probably the most important, Exchange Unified Messaging, the voicemail functionality, is also not available if the user is in Skype for Business online and Exchange on-prem. So our recommendation would be always move Exchange online. If Exchange is online, all features will be available. If Exchange is on-prem and you are in Skype for Business hybrid anyway, well then have the users where the mailbox is located. For SharePoint, we have actually a little less integration points. The first one is you go to a SharePoint site. I can see Mark was the last one to make a change to a document or is the owner of a document. I can see Mark's presence. I can directly contact Mark. Because this is done client-side, it is available no matter where SharePoint is, no matter where Skype for Business is. Then there's a second feature. It's called Skill Search. Skill Search is a search against my colleagues' my sites on SharePoint. So if Mark has a lot of information there that he works on Skype for Business, I can do a search in my Skype for Business client. I can say it's a skill search. It searches against the keywords on this my site, and I can find people in my organization. This functionality is only available if both SharePoint and Skype for Business are on-prem. And well, actually, these are the dependencies on Exchange and SharePoint, so you can see there is a lot of flexibility, not a lot of requirements. We do have a question.
In Delft, we've seen cards that come up that show that you've participated in a meeting that gets surfaced there. Is there any restrictions between on-prem link or exchange and Office 365 in the way that Dell gets that information?
Okay, so the question is about 12, that it shows you that you have participated in a meeting. Where do Exchange and SharePoint and, well, Skype for Business need to sit to enable that scenario? Do you know that, Mark?
So Delve is an online service that is searching across the Office 365 environment. So it will not have the capability of actually seeing everything that's on your on-prem environment as well. I think that is your question.
Yeah. Okay, and we have one more question here.
Yeah, UCS for Exchange in the cloud and Skype on-prem. Are you going to make that work?
So UCS is the Unified Contact Store, and it basically enables you to have your contacts stored on the Exchange server. And there are also some limitations, but most of these limitations the user wouldn't really notice. So that's why we didn't include that in the slides. I don't know if we have any plans for changes there on the combinations where we do support it.
Haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
Regarding the limitation between Skype for Business Online and Exchange on-prem, is there going to be any development on making those?
So the question is, we just talked about Skype for Businesses online, Exchanges on-prem. There are limitations. Is this going to change? I'm not aware really of a lot of changes, and the reason behind this, the strategy should be for customers to move Exchange online anyway, and this is also what we see with a lot of customers. So most of the customers where we want to do Skype for Business online or hybrid, they have most of the time Exchange online already. If this is a very important requirement for you, your company or customers of yours, please talk to us. We are happy to capture this information. And as Mark said, we are in a very dynamic model at the moment. Well, we are at a very dynamic model, so we are happy to take that feedback and bring it back to the people who make the decision. Now we want to briefly talk about the management tools, about the administration. In principle, there are UIs, both on-prem and online, and there are PowerShells for the online environment and the remote PowerShell to manage online. The Skype for Business server control panel is the UI that you run on the server where you can manage all the functionality or almost all the functionality. As you know, always the UI might not have everything, but most what you need, and you can configure your users, your policies, you can run that on-prem. Until Link 2013, the server control panel was really only to configure and manage users on-prem. The only thing that you could do is you could move users to online. Now we are going to start adding more functionality. So in the initial version of Skype for Business, you will be able to specify the SIP URI and the phone number of users that you manage online. Over time, we plan to add more and more features so that the Skype for Business server control panel will be really your one-stop shop where you can configure these kind of things. For online users, there's the admin center where you go, where you get all your status, which user is enabled for what. You can configure policies there as well. As always, UIs are great if you want to configure one user. UIs are not so great if you need to configure a lot of users. So this is where PowerShell comes in. You can use Skype for Business Management Shell to script everything on-prem, configure all your users, roll out policies, change policies, and you can remote PowerShell into Office 365 to do the same for Skype for Business Online. One thought that we wanted to include here as well is that you might say now, well, from what I've heard is the functionality that I need is really Skype for Business Server or Skype for Business Hybrid. But at the same time, I don't want to manage my own environment. I want to have a service, a cloud. Well, Skype for Business Server, it's a product. You can go to one of our many partners and you can ask them to manage or to host that on behalf of you so that you can get the benefits of having a cloud service, but also the full functionality of Skype for Business. So if this is really the situation you're in, that you want to have the full functionality, but you don't want to run it yourself, there are a lot of people who can help you with that. If you come for the Skype for Business booth, we can point you in the right direction, and there are also a lot of partners attending that are very willing to help you with that. Okay, let's look at the requirements. You want to do hybrid. First thing you need is Office 365 tenants. So you go to the Office 365 page, you sign up, you have your licenses, you assign them, now you have Office 365 with Skype for Business Online. Fantastic. Next thing you want to do, you want to enable directory synchronization between your on-prem environment and Office 365 so that users can use the same account, so that Office 365 has all the important attributes, that it knows the usernames and so on. Next thing, user authentication. You want to provide single sign-on so that users can use the same username and password, so you need to integrate some kind of user authentication. You can use either Azure AD Sync. We're still validating that, but it should be supported soon. And there's also ADFS in case you don't want to sync your passwords to the cloud, the Active Directory Federation services. Then, well, hybrid, you need to have Skype for Business on-prem, and you need to have that deployed in the user forest. Currently, if you have Skype for Business in a resource forest, we are not supporting that. We are getting some feedback. We're looking into that. But today, get sure that Skype for Business is deployed in the user forest. Firewall, well, obviously, your users need to talk to the Office 365 service, and this is new in Skype for Business, your front-end servers need to be able to talk to Office 365 as well. I just mentioned you can manage users from the links from the Skype for Business control panel. So this control panel somehow needs to talk to Office 365. So port 443 needs to be open there. And ExpressRoute. There is a slide coming up about ExpressRoute, so I'm not going to talk about that now, but soon. Then the question is, well, maybe I have already a version of Link or even older. If you have OCS Server 2007 R2, hybrid is not possible. We did not introduce that feature back then, so you need to upgrade to Link 2013. However, there's no direct upgrade path from OCS 2007 R2 to Link to Skype for Business Server, so you might have to take an intermediate step. If you have Link Server 2010, for hybrid, you need to have at least one front-end server and one edge server that runs Link 2013. Only if you have that, you can establish hybrid. And if you have Link Server 2013, hybrid is supported. There is also an in-place upgrade for Skype for Business Server. There's today a session on how to do that. So basically, you can reuse your existing hardware, you just upgrade the servers, and you get the new functionality and the new product, Skype for Business 2015. So now a quick slide on ExpressRoute. So usually, the way it looks like, you have your multiple sites where you have your offices, where you have your users, and in large enterprises, they are connected over an MPLS network. A network that is managed to get sure that you have good quality when you exchange voice traffic, when you exchange data, to get sure that all the data arrives at the other end without packet loss, without too much delay, to give users a good experience. Now, if you connect to Office 365, you would go over the internet, and you cannot control the internet. And you don't want to have your voice traffic, to have your conferences, depending on some public internet connectivity. So what we are introducing is ExpressRoute. It's basically a partnership with a lot of network providers that will provide an MSPL network to you, to your office, to your location, directly into the Office 365 cloud from Microsoft. So it is a managed network connection from your offices to our cloud services. We highly, highly, highly recommend to sign up for that if you want to do any voice-related workloads, if you want to do conferencing, if you want to do PSTN from the cloud, you should really do that. Telephony is something that is very network sensitive. Voice is something that is very network sensitive. So get sure that you do the right thing here and provide users good networks so that they can have a good experience.
Question?
ExpressRoute, again, starts US and then rolls out globally?
Yes. Okay, so life cycle, tremendously important. Expect you're all thinking along those lines on a regular basis. Again, can't emphasize enough how important it is to plan. in terms of Skype for Business, in terms of the different flavors, your business case, your strategic plan, your use cases. I expect this to change. I expect this to be different for different regions, different sites, etc. So you really want to think through this when you start. I think in general, almost everybody is going to be best served by essentially starting with the thought of a hybrid and then figuring out how to go from there. But your individual situation, as Thomas showed earlier, may change. Now, with regard to deployment, I also want you to think carefully about the fact that if the Skype for Business servers are in your data center or Microsoft's data center or essentially both, a lot of the elements end-to-end are going to be almost the same in terms of all of the paths that your voice and video are going to traverse. So what you really want to think about are your overall architecture, how that needs to change, topology, hardware, client, all the things. If you think about not just the last mile, but like the last foot, the last user experience, really think about how this is going to be optimized in these different situations. Devices, network, tremendously important. We talked about the SDN stuff earlier. Really, really think through how your network is going to support this. How is your LAN going to support it? There are different options with ExpressRoute for WAN and things like that, but your local networks are going to have to be set up properly. Deployment readiness is an approach that we recommend everybody does, starting with your plan, starting with your success criteria, and then making sure that everything is in place before your deployment starts. So if you continue around this circle, you'll see the run, keeping it healthy. We've just published new KHI packages. We've got call quality methodology as a package, the System Center Operations Manager. All of this is tremendously important. Again, you're going to want to really be clear about how you're going to proactively manage everything end to end. And then with regard to adoption and life cycle, all up, look at the adoption tools we have. We have a thing called RASK, which is the Rollout and Adoption Success Kit. Tremendously important and beneficial for you. And then think about the fact that this is a circle and it's constantly refreshing. So as you get through the first cycle, you may have some additional changes to make as you come back through, maybe do additional sites, additional regions. We talked earlier about how the product, the features are going to change, so the next time through there might be more features which you can enable, maybe some delegation scenarios, maybe some response groups, and maybe some more people move to online. And so then you'd have to go through this again and really make sure you were setting everything up properly. Go ahead.
The question now is, how does your personal journey for your company look like? So you will have some starting point. You don't have Skype for Business or Lync at all. You have only Office 365, purely for Skype for Business. You might be already in hybrid, or you might be in a situation where you have on-prem only. And there are these different destinations. You want to end up either pure Office 365, or in hybrid, or on-premise. And the question is really, how do you go from this starting point to your destination point? And there are lots and lots of ways how you can do that, and we will now walk through these different options and what they look like. The questions that you will face yourself is, well, what is the immediate need that I need to address? Do I already have a version of Lync server? Do I maybe have already integration in Office 365 because I'm doing Exchange in Office 365 or any other workload? And is it even possible for me as a company to integrate in Office 365? Every of these slides will now start with the destination where you want to go, and then the different starting points. So if the destination is you want to go into Office 365 only, you don't have anything. It's a green field. Well, you want to establish directory synchronization and authentication so that your users will be able to sign in using their accounts with single sign-on, and then you enable users and you're done. Users will be able to use Skype for Business. Of course, you need to do more in the background, all these questions that Mark just spoke about. So you want to get sure that the network is in a good condition. You want to get sure that you train your users, that you understand why do users even want or should want to use Skype for Business. But from the pure enablement perspective, what do you need to do? Your next finish looks like establish directory synchronization and authentication and enable users. If you have Office 365, Lync online, and you want to have Skype for Business, well, you can just relax and sit back. You already have Skype for Business. We upgraded all our tenants already, so now you have already all the new functionality, and that's really the benefit of using these cloud services, that you get new features first, and you don't need to care about how to upgrade. If you have existing hybrid, and you want to have only Office 365, well, move your users to Office 365. There are also some details that you might want to consider. So users, if you move them from one environment to the other, they will keep their contact list. They will have to reschedule meetings. But this is something that can be easily done with a client-side tool, so you need to educate your users about it, and they will be able, on the next day, to use the online environment. If you have a link server, or a version of link server, get sure that you meet the minimum requirements, and establish the hybrid configuration, move your users to Office 365, and then you can start to decommission the existing servers. Now, if your destination is hybrid, and you don't have anything today, again, you will always need the directory synchronization and authentication, so that's the first step. Now, you can decide, do I want to start online or on-prem? You can do either. It will work. So you can enable Office 365 for all your users, if this is something that you can do quicker, and then eventually you deploy the servers on-prem, and then you can move the users that you need to have on-prem functionality, you can move them down to the on-prem environment. They will keep their contact list, but again, meetings they have to reschedule, but it's a very, very quick way to enable all your users for instant message, presence, conferencing, these features. If you are in Office 365, well, then you need to deploy your on-prem servers, establish hybrid on your on-prem servers, and then you can start moving users as required. If you have existing hybrid, very easy, just do the in-place upgrade on your existing on-prem servers. Online is already upgraded automatically. And existing link server, establish hybrid, meet the minimum requirements for your existing servers, and then move users as required. And this is a little bit an odd one to talk about. If your destination is on-premise only and you are in a greenfield environment, well, obviously you deploy on-prem. However, if you're in Office 365 and you want to go into on-premise only, then we would like to challenge you on the fact on why would you want to do that. You want to stay at least in the hybrid configuration because hybrid will give you a richer feature set. It will allow you to do things like broadcast meeting and more in the future. So yes, it is technically possible to go from Office 365 to on-premise only, but it doesn't really make sense. If you want your users to be hosted on-prem, if you want to give them on-prem functionality, establish hybrid, but keep the hybrid established. If you have existing hybrid, the very same. Why would you sacrifice that? Keep hybrid in place. If you have an existing link server, well, you just need to upgrade to Skype for Business. So let's come to our conclusion. In the beginning, we told you what we want you to understand after the session. So now you know what are the different features, the different deployment options of Skype for Business. Where do you get what? What are the technical requirements? And now you should be able to choose the best approach for your specific information. And there are the three key takeaways, things that we talked through the session. And if these are the only things that you remember, then this session was a success for us. So if someone asks you later on, what session did you go to? What did you learn? This is what you have hopefully learned. First of all, hybrid gives you the richest feature set. If you have hybrid, then you have the most flexibility and you can use all the new features. Second, we just touched that in the last couple of slides, and it was more a side note, but it's a very important information. You can start on-prem or online, and you can move in either direction. There's no limitation or requirement that says you need to start in one place in order to go to the other place. So you can start where you want. And Mark spoke about the life cycle. Think about, why do I need to have Skype for Business? What is the problem that I want to fix? Where do I get my ROI? Only if you do that correctly, you will be able to have a successful deployment. Then think about all the questions like the requirements, how should I best deploy, how do I keep it healthy, and how do I get users to actually use it. Finally, I want to point out all these related sessions. You have seen the session titles throughout our session. If you look at the table, you realize that about half the sessions have already happened. You might think now that's not very useful to you, but all of these sessions, the recordings will be available on Channel 9. Usually they should be there within 24 hours. That means that some of the sessions you should be able to see already, and the other sessions are still coming up. And with that, I would like to ask you to fill out the evaluation. This is the code. You can scan it. And I would like to thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, everybody.